recording.
Okay. Oh my God.
Hi, everyone. We'll be just giving a few more minutes for some more people to arrive, but thank you for joining us tonight. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Brian, are you ready? Sheila, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Megan Hicklin, and I'm the Exhibitions Program Manager here at the Moss Arts Center. And we are very pleased tonight to have Sheila Pree Bright here with us, whose exhibition, A Beautiful Struggle, is on view here at the Moss Arts Center through November 20th. Before I hand it over to Brian Holcomb, our curator, I have a few Zoom technical notes for us to help make your experience more enjoyable. Right now, Sheila is sharing her screen. You should be able to toggle through your view in your Zoom window. There's a side-by-side view or a side-by-side speaker view. Please feel free to toggle through those for your optimal viewing experience. You should remain muted through this entire time. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the discussion. I ask that you please send your questions to me through the chat feature, and I'll be sending a prompt out there so you know who I am. Again, my name is Megan. And if you have questions about Zoom, about our galleries or our programming at the Moss Arts Center, you can also send that to me through the chat feature. This artist talk is being recorded. If you do not wish to be included in this recording, you can either turn off your video or sadly leave the chat. I hope you don't, but I understand concerns about privacy. And without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Brian Holcomb. Brian, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hi. So I just want to read a land acknowledgement statement here before I introduce Sheila. It's like My name is Brian Holcomb at the Virginia Tech Moss Arts Center, where we acknowledge the Tutelo and Monacan people, the traditional custodians of this land, and acknowledge the historical ties we have to the indentured and enslaved people in our region. So tonight, I'm happy to welcome Sheila Pree Bright, whose current show, A Beautiful Struggle, curated by my predecessor, Margot Ann Crutchfield. And I would like to read a short bio of Sheila before we say hello to her. So Sheila Pree Bright is an acclaimed international photographic artist who portrays large-scale works that combine a broad range of knowledge of contemporary culture. She's known for her series, hashtag 1960 Now, Young Americans, Plastic Bodies, and Suburbia. Bright is the author of 1960 Now, photographs of the civil rights activists and Black Lives Matters protests, published by Chronicle book. Also, her work is included in the book and exhibition Posing Beauty in African American Culture. She appeared in the 2014 feature-length documentary Through the Lens Darkly, Black Photographers and the Emergence of a People. She also appeared in the 2016 feature-length documentary film Election Day, Lens Across America. Her series have been exhibited at the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American Museum, Washington, D.C., the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland, the Art Gallery of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, the Leica Gallery, which I believe you're a Leica ambassador, Sheila,
Yes,
right?
yes, I am.
And Turner Contemporary London, the International Center of Photography in New York, and her work has been featured in Washington Post and the New York Times. Bright is the recipient of several nominations and award, and recently she has been awarded the commissioning for Picturing the South by the High Museum of Art. Her work is included in numerous private and public collections, to name a few: Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Library of Congress, the High Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College in Chicago, the Birmingham Museum of Art, Telfair Museums in Savannah, and the Microsoft Art Collection. And also, what's not on there is your gangster rap photos are included in the Dirty South, which will be opening up at the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston in November. And I think this is what some of the photos, which we could probably talk about too.
I could have added some of those.
Yeah, highly recommend visiting that show for anybody who gets a chance. All right, well, welcome, Sheila.
Well,
how are you doing?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Megan. First of all, I would like to thank Virginia Tech and the Moss Arts Center for allowing me in to share my work with you. And it's really been awesome for me to bring two bodies of work together that I have never shown together in a show. So thank you for that. And I'm going to start off talking about the 1960 Now images. And my parents are from the South. I'm not from the South. I was actually born in the South, and I left as a child. I'm a daughter of a soldier. And my early years, I lived in Germany. And from after that, we came back to the United States, and we moved from one place to one place, different places within the country. So as I was growing up, I'm a very shy, and believe it or not, and very quiet and introvert person. And it wasn't until my last year in college, I took a photography course. And that really opened me up because it allowed me to speak through the camera. I didn't have to speak to you because I didn't like to speak to people at all. And so I'm going to bring you back now. Brian mentioned about my hip hop series. I'm self-taught. I actually started when I left college, I went to Houston, Texas, and around about in that that time was hardcore rap and gangster rap. And coming from a child that's in an army, we were very protective. I didn't grow up around a lot of Blacks. I was around more diversity. So I had this curiosity. So I would go hang out, believe it or not, in the neighborhoods because I wanted to know about rap. And that's how I actually started in photography. And my first show was in Houston, Texas. I did not go. The curator called me and says, you need to get down here. And I said, no, you don't. I said, a picture speaks. Why do I have to come? So that's how I entered into the art world. And I believe that me looking back now, that photographing the hip hop culture with gangster rap, they were actually talking about what was going on in the neighborhoods back then about police brutality, everything. And so I feel that this prepared me for what in contemporary times with 1960 now. So it wasn't until 2013, Trayvon Martin happened. And in 2014, when George Zimmerman wasn't charged for the death of Trayvon Martin, I really started thinking about the movement, the civil rights movement. Didn't have a lot of knowledge about the movement, even though I moved to Atlanta in 1999. And so I wanted to reach out to the civil rights leaders that were unknown in the movement here in Atlanta to talk to them about the movement because they were young. They were young people. And I met Mr. Lonnie King. He started the Atlanta student movement here on the Black colleges in Atlanta. And that's when they started their movement where they were, segregation and doing the marches. And I started photographing them in my studio, taking portraits of them. So one thing led to another. All these killings kept going on. And I felt that I needed to go to the ground to find out what was going on. So this is my journey that started in Atlanta from St. Louis, Ferguson, from Ferguson to Baton Rouge to DC. It's a lot of different places that I went to. And so this image that you see before you was in Baltimore. And I happened to be in Baltimore when Freddie Gray passed in the hospital that Sunday. And the young people started protesting, and it was in West Baltimore. And I didn't know anybody. So I went down there. I took my sister's car because she was living there at the time, drove into West Baltimore, got out of the car and got totally cussed out and was told that they didn't want me here, Black folks here. Me here. They didn't want me here. They didn't want the media here or white folks, because the only time when we come into these neighborhoods is when we want to talk about something negative. You're not coming to these neighborhoods when we're sweeping up the streets. You're not coming to these neighborhoods when we have violence on our community among us, but you're here for the riots. And it was so emotional for me because, they literally cussed me out. And you have to think fast on your feet. And I looked at them and I said, it was two males and a woman. I said, right, I'm not from the community. You do not know me. But one thing that we have in common is that we have struggled ever since we came out of our mother's womb, whether we're conscious of it or not. They looked at me, they bowed their head and said, okay. I said, because I want to tell our stories from my perspective. And so the woman came up to me and she says, I'm gonna be honest with you. She said, I don't have any money. She said, do you have any money? And I said, I don't have any money, but I can give you a hug. And I gave her a hug and we cried. So the image right here, I'm gonna just go through the images and just really talk to you about my experience, because this was my first time being on the ground. And I'm feeling the aura of the people. The young people are very upset. This image right here is Ferguson. You see 3 young children, and in the back, you see a coffin with the children holding the coffin. And what it was is in Ferguson, they were, this was a metaphor to go to the police station to place the coffin at the police station. And this and for these images, when I photograph, I chose to photograph in black and white. I chose to photograph with a portrait lens because I'm a portrait photographer, and I want you to see, I want you to feel. I don't want you just to see the images. I really want you to listen to these images. And for the young people that they have to, these are 2 young Black girls and 1 little boy, and the rest is the girls in the back. It's just the struggle at that age. It reminds me of the Birmingham church bombing back there with the young little girls that have died within that. These are just images. This is in Atlanta, where the young people, what they would do, they were very creative. They were very disruptive. They were very creative because they wanted people to feel. That's why they shut down the highways. That's why they shut down the streets, because they wanted you to feel, because they felt like this was a dream to them. They heard about the civil rights, but they didn't, that generation did not really connect to it. They said, these are the fights that my grandparents and parents were fighting. And they just couldn't believe it. And this image right here was shot in Atlanta, and it was in, I believe it's 2016. The young people call me. What I do is, how I relate is I hang out, I talk, I observe. I don't go in to photograph. I'm not talking about at the protest, but a lot of these young activists. And they call me and told me, Sheila, we getting ready. This is in Atlanta. We're getting ready to shut down the Martin Luther King parade. You don't shut down the Martin Luther King parade. They said, this is what we're going to do. They shut it down. And when they shut it down, the elders, these were African Americans, they were so upset with the young people and yelled and screamed at them and told them Martin Luther King would be ashamed of you guys. And you know what they said to them? No, he would not. He's about resistance. And they got up on stage and spoke about how they were sick and tired. There was a hashtag that was called hashtag Reclaim Martin Luther King Day. They said, we are tired of the commercialization of Martin Luther King. He was more than just a dream. He was about resistance. You didn't like him when back then, okay? But now you're glorifying him. And this image right here is in Ferguson, and they have the flag. We're marching to the police station, and the flag is turned upside down. That you know, I know a lot of people know that means the flag is in distress. And so, I was like on the plane, off the plane, photographing. I don't even know how I was able to do what I did, but I felt that I needed to do this. My husband even said, Sheila, you gotta stop. And I said, I cannot stop. So when 2017 came, I think it was 2017 or 18, no, 17, it seemed like everything wasn't talked about so much in the media. But it wasn't until 2020 when we all experienced the pandemic, and then we experienced George Floyd. To see that imagery globally, worldwide, of this police officer police officer on the neck of George Floyd and the disposition that he had. And when he called out his mother, mama, that's when I cried. Because before then I had stopped, I didn't stop, but it wasn't as the young people call it, the uprisings wasn't so prevalent then, but the shootings continued. But I told myself I did not want to go back out and shoot. I cannot do this anymore. But when George Floyd happened and I experienced that on TV, different from any other ones, it was like, you got to go out. And what are you going to do? What are you going to show? And so I stayed in Atlanta all last year and I photographed, and you would have to go through my website to see the different imagery. I wanted to show a different perspective from the extent of, I photographed Black males that were suited up that did a silent march. I photographed mothers whose children here in Atlanta, who children were killed by the police here in Atlanta. And those were, I wanted to show those type of images, not always marching down the street and all of that. And when you see my images, I feel, because it's part of me and I connect with it, I feel these are silent moments for me. This image that you see right here was taken last year when the verdict came back where they did not indict the police officers. I went out there and it was, the march was led mostly 95% by women, and the males supported them. And you can feel, I'm telling you, you could feel the pain in when they would speak and talk about it. And they cried and they said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? They don't care about us. These young people do not understand. These young Blacks do not understand at all. And so, and this is not a mother, but the state representatives at the courthouse stand in solidarity with the mothers. And this is one of the state representatives, and she had on this mask, said, "Stop killing us." It's just her eyes, she captivated me. And I asked her, could I take her photograph? And moving on is, since George Floyd, I want to talk a little bit about this year. It's like it's a never-ending struggle, never-ending struggle. This image is the young people started it here in Atlanta, called the People's Uprising. And they were out marching because of the voting rights. They're calling it Jim Crow 2.0 of what they're trying to do in the South about poor people or people of color not able to vote. And if you see on his T-shirt, it says millennium. This is the millennium civil rights. They're not going to do it like their elders at all. And I can't even see this because this is right. And if you look at my imagery, you could tell that even though these are protest images, they are portrait. It's this one woman that had this shirt on that says, "God is dope. Black women matter." And the way she looked it up, I told her to hold that, because at that moment I saw that image and photographed her. And this is in Atlanta last year, and it was Juneteenth. And Juneteenth celebration for Black folks, because I don't remember what year it is, but in Texas, Juneteenth was the slaves didn't know that they were free. And I don't know if it was 2 years later or 3 years later. You'll have to look at that. So I was out and about, and this image really struck me of, this is either her mother, I'm thinking it's her grandmother, and she's in the car with her fist, the way that she's looking. It says, "When will Martin Luther King Jr. dream come true?" And you have the Black male with his shirt off, with his hands up, and you have that Ferris wheel in the back. And for me, that's very surreal. So those were my experience since 2014 of documenting the Black Lives Matter movement. And I feel that I will always, if anything else come up, I will go back out and photograph, but it really drains you. So I felt that with this show, I called it a beautiful struggle. I wanted to show how with all of this trauma from generations to generations of Black culture, is that we are a resilient group of people. We are a caring people. We will forgive. And we keep moving on because that's what we know and we have to do. So in 2004, I just got out of grad school with my MFA. I think this was 2 years later because I graduated in 2003. I started thinking about the imageries that were projected on in the news about Black folks. It's always something negative. It's always those type of images. And for me to come to Atlanta, I wasn't used to being around a lot of Blacks, believe it or not. When you get off that plane, it's like Blacks are everywhere in all these communities. So I felt that I wanted to show a different point of view when it comes to African Americans. So I pointed my camera towards Suburbia because at that time in the art world, a lot of the artists, photographers were actually speaking upon Suburbia, but I didn't see people of color. So I wanted to talk about the invisibility of African Americans in Suburbia. So I started going into these individuals' homes and I did not know them. And it was right. It was like, okay, they say, no, you can't come in. I said, I don't want to photograph you. I want to photograph the interior because I felt by going into these homes and photographing portraits of them, I wanted the person to experience the space, these different spaces, because I was really talking about universal commonality amongst all of us. And this image right here is, this is not my father's closet. Someone asked me if it was. I would go into closets. I would just observe the homes. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to connect with something. And I connected with this because my father was in the service. And you see on top of the shelf of these ancestors that, and it's portraits of them. You don't see portraits of that a lot of African Americans back in that time period. And I wanted to show children, but not show the children. And you see the toys that are on the steps, and you might not see this with there's a Black male that actually is in the home. He's sitting on the edge I think it's to your right and it's to my left. So I'm going to go through this. And this is like 3 generations of families, of women. And you have the grandmother on the desk. It's not a desk. I can't think of what to call it right now. And in the mirror, you see it's a young girl. And then on the chair, it's 2 dolls. So I'm talking about 3 generations of that. And this image right here really takes me back to the image that I showed you of the young woman in the protest with the Brianna mask on, the little flowery mask. And she's looking forward, But this, to me, I connect with that image because I think about Brianna, how she was laying in her bed and how she was shot in her home. And then you see this woman in this suburbia, and it talks about the future of technology, and she's reading Business Week. Because how I became national was with this body of work, Suburbia. And I had to go to, it was called the Santa Fe Prize Award, but the name is different now. It's called Santa Fe. I know it's called Center, not Santa Fe. And when I went there, even though I won this award, I had to go and let publishers, curators, photo editors look at my work and critique my work, in which I don't have a problem with. But what really surprised me, and I don't know why I should have been surprised, is that 90% of them told me that I didn't have enough signifiers in the work to show that these were Black homes. And I said, that was the point. I was trying to show the universal commonality amongst us. Even though I'm Black, I'm an artist, I'm a photographer, a lot of times that we get projected on to talk about all you want to talk about is identity. I'm talking to you about my experience, and I happen to be Black. And so moving forward, I was commissioned from the Moss Art Center to do a piece. And this piece speaks to me about new beginnings. It's like the rebirth of us. How are we going to move forward and navigate in this world? Because we have, I feel since COVID and since COVID, and what am I trying to say? Something. Well, COVID, I think that our world is shifting, and it's not going to be the same. So I wanted to bring in a piece to show how there is going to be a future, but it's going to be a different future. And what is this new beginning? So I think that I spoke long enough. Brian, you want me to talk? Because you could probably.
Oh,
yeah.
no, yeah, I mean, you answered a lot of my questions that I had because you're so thorough, about the work. But I do, I mean, I wanted to one of the unique things about the exhibition downstairs is that we're able to juxtapose, the Suburbia series, which is very private interior. It's more like portraits of interior spaces, not, portraits of people. Yeah. And then you have, and the people in those are more hidden, yet in the Black Lives Matter photos, it's this performance of power where they're there in portraiture. And that made me think too about your Young American series as well, where you had the young people posing with the American flags and what that relationship was to them. And then that one photo in the protest with the flag upside down, showing that it was in distress. So I think it's how do you feel looking at these two works, seeing them together, and any type of connections to that, of the advantages of showing this interior and exterior world, showing figures that are hidden or figures that are performing, in positions of power?
Well, I think with these two bodies of works together, my question today are we beyond racism or not? Can we get past it? So for me to show the Suburbia images juxtaposed with the 1960 now, a lot of individuals feel that, why is Blacks complaining? Why is this? Why is that? But then again, you see these beautiful interiors of the Black middle class. But then again, still in this present time, you see the social unrest unrest when it comes to people of color, And so I think to bring these two bodies of works together, I think maybe that will give someone more of a critical thinking about the culture, about us, period, as people, period, because today in contemporary times, we can't really, I'm not saying we can't, but it's really hard. I don't think nobody really listens, okay? And the reason why I say that, we have this technology with social media, and everybody's they speak what they speak on these platforms, and you could cancel somebody out if you're saying one thing, so what do? And then a lot of people are afraid to speak, with that. So how are we, like with this last images, how are we going to move forward? These are new beginnings for us, and are we willing to want to move forward as a people?
Yeah. So, and you mentioned, I mean, you kind of answered another question I had with the social media, and you conscious, the conscious choice to put the hashtag in front of like the 1960 now, which too was also enlightening when you see the younger generation saying, we want to take over MLK Day. We want to get back to what he was talking about, not glorifying it to or capitalize on it, capitalism, and how, I mean, even that just also made me just think too, is like, and just to say, it's like, I am from Atlanta too. Sheila and I have known each other since like 2003.
Right.
Right. And stuff. And she was always, and when I had the gallery in Atlanta, Sheila was always a calming force when she came into the gallery.
I didn't know that, Brian. I did not know that.
Oh, you were. Yes. Yeah. And what makes me, so I mention that because, I think it's like with the Atlanta Hawks too, with also having their MLK instead of ATL, because MLK is an embodiment of Atlanta too. And things like that is like, I appreciate and enjoy. I'm just also curious too. It's like, I wonder how like this younger generation, is that another continuation of us like glorifying King, but not listening to his message too. So
because one thing that I learned about being on the ground is that, what I heard a lot from the elders is they're not organized. They don't have a leader. The young people said, you kill Martin Luther King, you kill Malcolm X, you kill, all these leaders. We don't want you to know who the leaders are. We're all leaders. And I thought that was very, very, very interesting when it came to that. And they're very organized, believe it or not. It may not look like it, but they are organized. And a lot of these individuals that are in the movement now, a lot of them are artists. They're creative people. And I feel that in the world that we live in now, it is going to take the image makers to move us forward and show us how to move forward.
Well, thank you for that, Sheila.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Megan, do we have any questions, from the audience? I mean, because Sheila and I can talk.
I want to ensure that people can chat, because I've put some strict security on here. So if someone can respond to my chat and just say, yes, I can ask questions, I want to make sure that they're not trying to type and are not getting through. But yes, I can. Thank you, Meredith. All right.
Yeah, because that would be good, because I would like to hear whatever your responses are, because I feel that we're at a time where a lot of people talk about safe space. I think we need brave spaces.
I think so.
Yeah, we got to start the conversation, at least start the conversation instead of being silent,
As we gather our bravery, I have kind of an observation / question for you by way of one of our student groups that came through the galleries, if you don't mind.
Oh, no problem.
And that's one of the things that I've seen is with any tour that comes through is getting them into that safe frame of mind of talking about such an emotional subject. and such a difficult subject. It does take bravery to there's a fear of saying the wrong thing, all of that kind of stuff, but there's no way to really move forward in this matter unless we talk, period. But anyway, one student observed the difference between her feelings towards the black and white imagery in the 1960s now works, as opposed to the color imagery in Suburbia. And it was an African-American student. And she said, when I look at the 1960s now works, after all of the exposure to all of that kind of news in the media and everything, she said, this doesn't feel real to me anymore. After seeing so many, violent images and and we talk about that too, about how the media curates images of certain movements and how that's a whole other ball of wax of what images they're choosing to show. And anyway, how that almost feels like the fantasy, that almost feels like something disconnected from her, and that the images of Suburbia feel like life, feel like home, feel like that she connects with that, and that also the black and white, the use of black and white in those images reminded her of the civil rights, and that it feels like it's, if you squinted, it could be from another time period, it could be from another historical era. So it was almost like an opposite, and this was a young student, that it felt alien to her, even though you would think she would be of the generation
that was
it would be backwards. Yeah,
that's the reason why I chose black and white and called it 1960 now. What has changed?
Exactly.
That was the whole point. And that's really interesting for her perspective, how she felt that wasn't real, because a lot of the imagery that we see, like you were saying, in projected media, how many times am I going to see a black male on top of a car burning, with fire and all of that? That's, like you said, that's curated, and I wanted to show something different, to show you how they're feeling. It's very emotional out there. I mean, it's emotional on the ground. It really is.
And I think she was talking about fatigue from all of those violent images. But we went on to discuss how violence is not at the heart of your images. There's a humanity restored. You see the people again. It's not. So but that was really interesting for me of her personal relationship to that imagery that she's been hammered with, as opposed to your imagery.
Right. And that's interesting perspective, because it's at a point where I know with my parents, talking with Mr. Lonnie King, who started the Atlanta student movement, they seem to have more of a resilience than the young people. The young people, they're not like the elders back then. And what was so interesting that Mr. King told me? He said that I didn't know a lot about the civil rights movement. And he says, well, we felt your generation because we didn't want to talk. He was in the movement. We didn't want to talk to you about the movement. We were killed, acid thrown on us. So we were trying to protect you. And so I ran home to my mother and I said, Mom, why didn't you talk to us about the civil rights movement? She said, because I didn't want you to hate white people. So I think we're living in amazing times right now.
Yeah.
And people are going to fall through fall by the wayside. But then you're going to have people that's going to be able to move and carry this on, as I'm talking about all of us. I'm not just talking about Blacks, okay?
Right. Right. Because it didn't originate there. It's
it didn't. It didn't. So we have to imagine, that's why I say artists, we got to imagine a future for us. And I feel that we will show the way.
Well, and galleries are still a privileged space. Where there's a lot of work being done to change that, but they are still a privileged space. Right. And work like yours, accesses there, and it's getting the job done through those avenues. Do you know what I mean? It's it's like you're attacking it from the inside, kind of in a way.
Right.
If you get what I mean.
No, I understand. See, when I came out of school, Brian know this, I was, my career was like going fast. It was like, oh my God, what's going on? And I've always showed in museums and galleries, okay? And it wasn't until 2000 and I think 12 or 13, after I had my first solo show at the High Museum with the Young Americans, the image in the back, I was approached by a guerrilla street curator who told me that that work needs to be out in the streets. And it just changed me, because my works do speak to the people more so than it does in the galleries of the museum. But I feel that it's important to show that too in the museum.
Yeah, one of the things I really liked about the images from the Black Lives Matter was the fact is like looks like your lens is listening, whereas this is such a space that's saturated with the media, like showing us what they feel, basically upsets people. They want to get a reaction, and it goes back to the social media algorithms that recognize, wait, we want to boost the post that caused the most anger.
Right.
And that's kind of coming out, and that's what makes it even more important for artists like yourself, who have a sensitive eye but actually listen through the camera and show. It's like, so right, so you don't see 100 images showing something that everybody deems as negative. You saying, like you were saying, is like with the person standing on the car burning, or the background, and that's what we get saturated with. So that makes it even more important to have this body of work. Right,
because I mean, these images are the sensationalized images. That's what people are drawn to. So what I'm trying to do is to rewire how we look and see imagery in our mind, because we're consciously, so we're driven to that type. If you see a quiet moment, it's like, no, it's the other, So it's not an easy job for me as an artist, but I feel that that's my pathway and what I have to do.
Yeah, it's the group, the student group we had the other day, they were talking about, all you would hear about is, or you would hear someone talking about, I support Black Lives Matter, but like there was always a qualifier, but I don't agree with the property damage, or I don't agree with all the violence, or because, and they started talking about when there was a Target somewhere that was broken into.
Oh, I remember.
It's like, Lord, you never stopped hearing about that Target. It was like,
I mean, I was in Baltimore when in the community, they burned down, was it CVS or Walgreens? It was something.
It was a Walgreens, I think.
Yeah.
But it was like, and the media would just latch on to that. And it's like, there is no qualifier. Black lives, lives matter. And it's like your work centers it back to the human story behind it. And you can apply that to just about any kind of issue, and not to take away from the issue at hand, but of the media's kind of inclination to divide, for whatever reason, to kind of divide people and make it an us versus a them, or this side versus this side. That there always has to be a qualifier. There always has to be an opposition to an agenda, when it's very simply people asking to be treated like people. That there is no qualifier against that. Like, I support that, but like there is no but. Everything else is fucks.
Yeah, but also too, being on the ground, one of my experience was when, is it the alt-right they're all dressed in black. And this happened last year here in Atlanta. They started breaking the windows, at the CNN building. So they think that it's always Black folks doing that. And the young kids were yelling at them, telling them to stop. They said, we're trying to help you because all y'all do is say no justice, no peace. So we're trying to help you. I can tell you so much. I've learned so much.
I know it's unbelievable, but yeah, it's
unbelievable. But at a point though, that's why I call the show a beautiful struggle. We must continue to move forward, and it is a beautiful struggle because I feel that people always talk about love, but I always say that if there's no justice, let's see, beauty, love, justice. If there's no beauty, if you can't see the beauty or the justice in this, there's no love at all.
Oh, we do have a question. Thanks, Meredith. Let me see. Let me read through it here.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. I'm reading it. Meredith is curious about the decision to attach the prints directly to the wall. I can actually address that if you all don't mind. The reason we presented it the way we did, one was, to be completely frank, we're in a COVID year, which is a tightening of the strings, to be completely embarrassingly practical about it. And we wanted to make these prints as big as we could. And to frame them would have limited the size and number of prints that we could have presented. And we didn't want to limit the show at all. We wanted to do as many and as larger prints as we could. And the material is actually called Phototex. It's a full color printable fabric almost. It's like a polyester blend fabric. It's amazing. And it actually prints in very high resolution. It is not glossy. It's matte, so you don't have any reflection on it like a photograph would. I'm not a photographer, so I'm not going to say whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage, but it does give a richness and a depth to it, I think, almost like printing on actual cloth. So I'm happy with how they look, and it allows you to get really, really close. There's kind of no interruption of glass to it, so you can get right up in there and really immerse yourself in it. So I like how they turned out with it, and like I said, we really wanted them big and in your face, I think. So I hope that answers your question.
The mat is really, you're right about the mat.
Yeah,
it's much richer in the color. Yeah.
Collecting and archived. Let's see.
So Sheila, when you were, I wanted to ask about, and I know we don't have images, but anybody listening can see these images on Sheila's website at sheilapreebright.com. The Invisible Empire, the Stone Mountain photos, because I was trying to place like what year you were taking those photos, and then you also mentioned like you were photographing people. Did you say you were photographing a parade or a demonstration in Stone Mountain as well?
No, what happened, it was in 2019, the Washington Post photo editor called me, did not know him. And he says, I love your work and I want 10 photographers to do an essay. And I said, an essay on what? He said, racism. I'm like, oh my God. I said, I'm tired of talking about that. And I told him that I was not going to photograph people. I will talk about it, but I wanted to go to Stone Mountain and photograph the landscape because I felt that it's all about the land. And for me to start at Stone Mountain in the history of Stone Mountain, where it was the second coming of the KKK on Thanksgiving Day, burning a cross, reading the Bible on that mountain, I wanted to talk about the root of racism when it came to that, from that point of view. And I actually shot the images in black and white. They're dark, but they're beautiful. And so that's the work that's going to be shown at the High Museum in November. I think it opens up on November the 4th. So I just wanted to experience the land because we're also caught up, if I could say this, on the flesh. We can't get past it. So I felt that if I could talk about it through the landscape and draw you in, it'll give it a different perspective, because as an artist, I'm always want to elevate the imagery, elevate how I talk about the work.
I'm glad you give me that background too, because it did feel like a photo essay looking through it, and for our listening audience, they are like very artistic, like black and white photos, to where a lot of information is hidden. You see the landscape, but also you place like a Bible opened up in one of the images to a specific passage. I can't remember which passage that page was open to.
It was Romans 12, because, and that's actually my father's Bible. I started doing a lot of research about the Confederacy, and like any of us, I didn't know, all I knew about it is what I was told about it, or if I, watching documentaries. But when I started diving deep into it and start doing the research, it really like, oh my God, I understand. I'm not saying that it's right, but I understand why they cannot let it go, okay? And so it informed me, and for me, it was good, because we think that we know people, but we don't know each other at all. So this work for me was very personable, because my parents grew up in the Jim Crow era. They were 18, 17 years old. 17 years old. And it makes me think about them a lot. They're gone now, both of them. And it makes me think about their life back then. But also too, is like I keep saying, is how are all of us going to move forward with this? And that's how I'm going to talk about the work, because I want to bring everybody in. And it's so funny, the photo editor, I told him I wasn't going to shoot people. He said, you got to photograph people. I said, no, I don't. He said, yes, you do. And when I sent the images to them, they were like, you don't need no people in here. They got what I was trying to say. So I'm shifting. I'm always going to photograph people, but I'm shifting away from that, because I just received another commission of shooting the landscape. So I'm in the landscape now, and I love it. I really, really. And I'm photographing flowers too, with the women with Rebirth of Us.
Yeah, that was the other reason why I wanted to bring that up. Because, one, you referenced Invisible Empire, and we've been talking about visibility with your previous series. Also, it was less like documentary and more of a photo essay, to where you got the sense that you're trying to tell a story. And of course, I'm sure everybody knows that Stone Mountain is, the large Confederacy, leaders carving of Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Jefferson Davis on horseback, riding triumphantly, which, we have a very problematic laser show that would reanimate them, riding off and trying to give us a little history of the battle. So this is, for us who grew up in Atlanta, Stone Mountain is this beautiful park, and this carving there, even though it started in 1916, it wasn't finished until 1972. So it always would seem to go along where they would get funding was when there was a fight for voting rights. So in the 60s, when MLK this marching and civil rights movement was going on, that was another big influx of funding for finishing that carving. And that's not a coincidence. So and the other thing about it, which is, I mean, because these are the reasons why it's like we need to like pay attention to this, and artists need to look at this lens, because it's there. Unless you dynamite this carving off the side of the mountain, it's taken over the history of this mountain too, or large exposed piece of granite, by putting this carving on it. Yet when I visit Stone Mountain and everything, nobody is interacting with that carving. They're doing, they're jogging up the side of the mountain, they're walking, they're enjoying the parks. That carving has nothing to do with the neighborhood that surrounds it.
Right.
Or the current.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Actually,
No.
I talked to individuals, and I talked really to foreigners that were there, Asians, Africans, and they had no idea of the history. And when I started telling them, it just like exhausted them. They wanted to run from me and stuff. But a lot of people don't have the idea of what's going on with that mountain, because you have over 4 million. Was it 4 million, a billion people that come to that park every year? Mm-hmm.
It is I think it's the most attended, national, park that we have in Georgia. And it's definitely,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely, I would think it's a family place. That's where the families go and for picnics or to enjoy the park. And then there's a walk trail that goes up to the top of the mountain that mainly people use for exercise.
Yeah.
And so I didn't, did you walk up the trail when you went up to photograph through this?
I've been everywhere on that mountain, places I didn't even know that exist.
Mm-hmm.
I went everywhere.
Yeah. And are you done with this photo essay? Or are you continuing to work with Stone Mountain, visit and photograph?
Well, actually, I think I'm finished with the stills. I'm working on doing a film now. More of a conceptual type film, no people in it. I don't want people in it.
Have you officially had it?
Yeah, because I'm telling you, I'm deep and diving into the landscape now, and I'm really having fun with it. So the film is not part of the exhibit, but it's something that I feel that I want to do. Mm-hmm.
Well, Megan, do we have any other questions from the audience?
I think we're just about wrapped up here.
Okay.
You've been incredible, Sheila, and answered all of our questions. And
Meredith,
go ahead.
I think Meredith's trying to get in one last question here from our audience. One of our.
Okay.
Come on, Meredith.
She wants to go ahead, Megan. I'll let you.
Okay. Meredith is interested about your use of the color blue and blue tones in the commission photograph.
Well, if you look at those are blue roses. There's no such thing as a blue rose. And I felt that was very important with to photograph the roses in blue, because it's like determination. It's about moving on, and it's about your imagination of how we're going to move forward. I keep saying that, the new beginning, because there's no such thing as a blue rose that was manufactured that way. They put dye in it, actually. And blue has a sense of calming. And how the woman is just looking straight on, and in her eyes, it's like she's determined, It, to me, when I keep looking at this image now, it looks like a head of a dove. Look, and then the feathers are in the back. And that's a metaphor for that.
Now, Sheila, did you think back to, like, I mean, because this photo uses elements kind of like a photo collage, it's a composition that not only you photograph, but you collage these elements together. And then also you're talking about things like these colors, right. A blue rose doesn't exist. It's, in a way, it's artificial. Yet you're doing it more for like the emotion quality. I was just like thinking about, for some reason, like when I first saw this, I was reminded of your Plastic Bodies series. Yes. Yeah. And I was curious did you think about that series at all? I know it's completely different because you're projecting real people onto the artificial image of body that the Barbie doll, projects.
Yeah, it was pandemic, and not with this particular image. There's other images that I've started with, and you couldn't go on the outside. Okay. So I started buying flowers. I started one-on-one with individuals, photographing them. And I thought that the best way to speak of the rebirth of us was to bring it into more like you heard of Afrofuturism? Kind of go beyond. And that's what I was thinking about. And what's really interesting, about 2 years ago, I you know how like when you was young, you used to cut out cardboard and paste stuff on there? I did one of a woman, and I saw that, and it made me think about that, to do this. And that was 2 or 3 years ago. So it's digital collage, and everything was photographed separately, from each flower to each, and then the woman. And I decided that I wanted to use a blue filter to complement the roses, because, like I said, it's splendor. It makes you, coming out of all this unrest that we're having, not just with social justice, with all this unrest. We need something calming to our mind and our consciousness, because our minds stay in a chaotic state. I'm telling you, a chaotic state. Yeah. So this symbolized the impossible.
That's great. And I'm glad that you brought it back to the calming force that you are. To bring it back. So I would say that I just wanted to thank you again, Sheila, for giving us the opportunity to share your work, and also being present here to share, to talk more in depth about it with our, audience. And thank you. And of course, special thanks to Megan for making sure that everything works. Everything works.
Right.
Our, we recording and we'll have a bunch of people watching this recording, which will be up on the website. Megan, are we doing a link, or are we just putting it on the exhibitions page?
Sure.
Sure. Yes to all of the above. It will be available on the website somehow. Stay tuned.
I want to thank Moss Arts Center, like I said earlier, on the opportunity and the commission. It's really pushing me as an artist and stuff. So thank you so much, Brian and Megan.
Well,
thank you.
And I have to thank Margot too, because she was the one
that
brought you here.
Yeah, Margot.
I'm just the lucky one that gets to be here, and everybody did the hard work.
Yeah. Thank you, Margot. Yes.
Yes, you'll see this. I think she'll get a link. I'll make sure to share a link with her. So,
okay.
and thank all of you who hung in there. This was absolutely wonderful. And your show is has been very well received and very impactful. And it's just gotten started. So we look forward to sharing
Oh
it
my
for
God,
another 2 months.
Started, just got started. Oh, wow.
So yeah, I mean, we've got lots more tours booked for it. So
Well, thank
it's going
you.
great.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone. Good
Yeah.
night.
Good night.